some expanded continuities, especially from the last time we were taping. Remember the examples I was giving that I made up having to do with local and universal problems? You remember your grandmother either out there or in here. Did everybody catch on? It was, I think, the way Kyroot wrote it, but the one that Rachel was just reading, about the second or third of hers from the last, that was supposed to be a conversation. He wrote it, and on paper I guess you could tell it, but it was the first voice, a guy, or whoever it was saying, hey, it's pretty complicated out here. And there was another voice saying, hey, it's pretty complicated in here. And no one said, well, do you want to swap places? And that's when it got up to the punchline that seemed to have nonplussed most people. What did that have to do with what I was saying? Well, primarily this. See, that's part of the fun, is to say, to set it up, what does this have to do with anything? It's like setting up a joke and you don't know what the punchline is until you set it up. But see, I just killed a couple of seconds to think, what does that have to do with this? That's what I could have done, but I didn't. I forgot to do it, and so now I'm still behind. Well, the connection is too obvious for me to comment on, so. Local and universal problems. You recall I was talking about your grandmother either out there, like your real grandmother or grandfather, deploring the sorry state of contemporary life. And I used the example, I didn't say it that time, but it could have been her grandson. How about the guy that had the check for the insurance claim that he had made, and he pointed out that he had made money, that they paid him more than what he had lost that was stolen from his car. I know some of you got glimpses of the time, but let me just expand it just a little bit. I was primarily laying on the grandmother example in a certain way of her decrying the kinds of violence, crime that she was seeing on television, and I was also pointing out that your grandmother either out there or your grandmother in your own nervous system would not even have a TV. She would not be getting the newspaper. She would not be having some kind of information faxed to her home right off the CNN line, unless it were for the same kinds of circumstance that produce the things that she's decrying. And I just wanted to lay just a little bit, in case any of you didn't do it on your own, on the other example. The man who had something stolen from his car, or his car set on fire. Let's change it a little bit. How about just his car was stolen? And he, now, forget just the insurance policy, he made money until it was pointed out to him, which he could not hold on to in a universal manner, that he hadn't made money. He didn't have to point it out. If he had gone along with my example the way I did it, you simply ask him, well, you took the insurance company all right, except how long have you been paying premiums? And it had been 21 years, I believe, that the man admitted last time we were taping. But how about this, just to expand the universality of that? In that kind of example, this man would not have even had a car. Were it not, here's the tricky part, because the words do not cover it all, but were it not for the same conditions, the same more universal conditions, not local conditions, and not conditions that his local intelligence might be able to perceive, but it was the same more universal conditions were in effect, and had they not been in effect, the same kind of conditions that caused what was called crime, such as someone stealing his car, he would not have had a car. Now that's the point. You get to such as that, and probably some of you by now that's been around this for a while, I would hope that some of you could almost guess where I was going to go there verbally a few seconds ahead of me. But please note that that view is not native to the human nervous system. Do not think that it's simply not native to you. It's not native to anybody, although it is reasonable. Although it is sane once it is stopped and pointed out the same way as pointed out the man laughing about getting more off the insurance claim than he actually lost. Ha ha ha. Until you ask him, how long have you been paying claims? Ordinary intelligence does not even see that there is any pertinence. It can see what it might call a connection, but it is not wired up, because that is not part of the current purpose of life through man, to be able to perceive such as that. And so it's not simply a connection. It's not a connection between crime and you having a new Porsche. But it is in a way that the ordinary intelligence cannot begin to perceive. And this covers it verbally. It is the same universal conditions as they apply somewhere locally. Let's say here on the planet Earth is what we're talking about now. It is the same conditions. And I say that unconditionally. It is the same conditions that produce what this guy called the crime that had his car stolen. It is the exact same universal conditions were in place, were in operations that produce crime, and had it not been for those same conditions, the man would not have had a car. Now you can sit and look off, or I guess you can sit and say, well, yeah, I heard that Wednesday, I heard that before. You should find the strangeness, you should find, and not in a way that is defeating to your own intellectual wherewithal, but to realize that that is going on continually. And I don't have to make up examples. You are living the examples every day. Your nervous system, not just behavior-wise, it doesn't even have to be oftentimes manifested in action, but the thinking of action, the kinds of responses you make to life, the kinds of responses that you make to television, to what you read, to overhearing other conversations, it is the same kind of response that life is dealing with its own dialogue back to itself that comes through you, and you think perhaps you're talking to yourself, or you think you're talking to the Walter Cronkite or Peter Jennings, or you're talking to the New York Times Ed Ott page. It's life talking to itself. And you're just like a little, we've got to admit, we're real little teeny speakers. We're not big fancy woofers, we're not Bose or JBLs, we're like these little 19-cent speakers that you can buy raw at Radio Shack and even worse places. But you're wired up to take it seriously. If you begin to see the reality behind what I'm calling local problems, local interest, local intelligence, put it crudely, you can't take it seriously anymore. Oh, you can hear about it, I'll admit that. And you can hear me say, if you begin to see that, you can't take it seriously in your own nervous system, to show you, in case anybody was ever foolish enough to think it was some sort of struggle between me and life. If you ever feel like it's a struggle between you and life, I already gave you a hint through Kyroot, just immediately give up. I mean, as soon as you can even see a towel, throw it toward life. Or if nothing else, at least give it the right kind of Benny Hill respect and go, there is no contest, but it is a kind of unrecognized ordinary people. It's fun, brain smile, to see that everything that you ordinarily do, inside of you, not behavior, let's don't even worry about behavior for a second, but what goes on in here that seems to be, to ordinary people, they're generally wired up in the Western world, in all parts of the world that is now so-called civilized and sophisticated, to where the general center of interest and activity is the brain, is the intellect. They find that the thinking of action is that which is fragmented, continually unsatisfying, always feeling as though science, if not psychology, is always on the verge of connecting all the dots, and then by God, somebody somewhere says, wait a minute. We got new technology, we got a new microscope, we got a new telescope. We found some more damn dots. We finally turned it toward the southern sky, and I'll be a son of a gun. More dots. I was seeing examples everywhere. The thing about crime, because that seems serious enough, and we're not, I'll speak for all of us, I'll speak for you, we're not absolute idiots. Of course, nothing's absolute in the three-dimensional world. But you wouldn't go around and solicit criminal behavior in which you might play a passive part. And there would be no reason for you to find an area that had the highest crime rate in the city and immediately drop everything and try to find yourself a rental spot there, or to move in a cardboard box so you could be there. But these same conditions, there's a reason I'm laying on this, because I can make simpler examples, but that seems to be, from all intents and purposes, a serious problem. And if it happens to you, if you got mugged, if you got assaulted, it is a serious problem. You don't like it. Nobody likes it. But the same conditions that produce everything you do like right now produce that. And it's only you, it's only humans, it's only life through humans that cause one of it, progress. I'm making it simple still. In some other aspect, crime. Localized intelligence, local intelligence, properly says, and it cannot be argued out of it. It might be taught to phrase a better English sentence, but it cannot be argued out of it that, hey, we could separate crime. That it's foolish for someone to say what I just said. That we have the good parts of civilization, or technological progress, as I call it. We've got those. But crime is not the same thing. Oh, I can see some connections, blah, blah, blah. Remember that sociological argument that I replayed that I'm aware of. As long as you're operating on the basis of local intelligence, it is fragmented by its very nature, and at best it sees that things are connected. But as long as you see merely that things are connected, the unrecognized problem with that is, if they are connected, then there is also the inherent belief that they can be separated. That is, that anybody who would make any sort of statement or argument that you could not have what is called crime separate from what is called progress. Now you could fill in synonyms for that. And ordinary intelligence would tell you that's not true. That there may be some connection. And I went through some of that last time we were talking, the kind of argument that could be made that progress itself, one aspect of it, one or more aspects of it, have produced circumstances that made the have-nots or made the undereducated, made those who are already behind in the rat race of civilization even fall further behind, and that's what produces crime. Nothing produces anything. Nothing produces crime. Crime doesn't produce technology. Technology doesn't produce crime. Technology doesn't produce technology. But as long as there is the local view that things are connected, then you're stuck with local intelligence. You won't even look any farther. You could not look any further. Because as far as you're concerned, you can see problems. And you can see, if not the absolute cure, you can see immediate treatment that would be beneficial. And your first beneficial action, no matter how it was phrased in your mind and anybody else's mind, experts, sociologists, politicians, is in some way to begin trying to sever this connection. That crime should not be connected to progress. Cut them loose, and then we'll deal with them separately. That it's ridiculous to say that crime is only increased because of technology. Oh, it could be in a strange way, but we've got to sever that and then deal with it. I can make other examples which I've done. You cannot lack your liver and be in favor of that and not like your spleen. You cannot be in favor of pistons and be a critic of rods. You can't have it. And ordinary intelligence, I'm fixing to move, but ordinary intelligence will say, well, you know, I hear that, but that's a kind of metaphor that goes nowhere. It's ridiculous. That anybody knows if you're going to have an engine that has integral parts, or the human body, and you can't just pick out. It's silly, I'm sure that they could say to me, to say, all right, you've got an engine, and I need an engine. Need this internal combustion engine, I need everything. I can't live without it, the way my life is now. And so you're making a silly metaphor of some kind. I don't even see the point. I hear what you're saying, to say that somebody says, I'm in favor of pistons. I love pistons the same way I love technology in general. But the way in which I detest and criticize crime is the same way that I feel about connecting rods. And so ordinary intelligence can say, that is ridiculous. I hear what you're saying. I don't see the point. That's some kind of kindergarten metaphor. It's worse than that. It's a metaphor from an insane asylum, I guess, because nobody with any sanity who wants an engine, who needs an engine, would allow themselves to say, all right, I like an engine, I need an engine. I'm in favor of the engine in toto. Just, I am. But we have got to do something about connecting rods. I mean, you should know that. All right. Ordinary intelligence says that is ridiculous. That is the way ordinary intelligence deals due to the pressures, the hiring practices of life. That is the way ordinary intelligence deals with life. That is, as silly as that may have sounded, that is a prime example. That is an exemplary parallel to all forms of criticism having to do with human nature. It just doesn't seem that way. But any denunciation, any criticism, that is, any kind of energy that runs through your nervous system and gets verbalized on your part, is to look at that ungodly behavior. Look at those kinds of people, what they say and what they do. Life needs that, or you wouldn't be doing it. But if you're the one that energy is trying to come through and does come through, and you let it come through, and you stand there like that little 19-cent speaker, and you think, not only am I a decent full-range speaker, which you're not, you're a local noise, it's just like one little megahertz, I guess, out of the full, if you're going to use the audio spectrum from whatever it is nowadays, 70 to 14,000, and you're not even one. I'm just bragging. But you're like one, and you stand there, and this flows through you. Or you feel like, well, I'm the Lincoln Tunnel, and all traffic in the world comes through me. All intelligence comes through me. And you're a wormhole. Everybody is. But you're supposed to take it seriously. Because if you didn't take it seriously, you wouldn't take it seriously. But all forms of criticism, you're not recognizing it, is the same thing. And I'm sure by now that many of you, let's say all of you that's been around here for a while, I can apparently, between you and I, at times you see it so clearly that you think I should just move on. But all forms of criticism about anybody, it's just native. Everybody criticizes everybody else. And it appears to be a human folly or a human manifestation. It is the transmission of energy. But all forms of criticism are exactly the same thing. There is a beautiful parallel. You're saying that, all right, I accept the general machinery, the engine of life in general, which is very big of you. But you can say, all right, I like it, or I need it, in the same way that you may need an internal combustion engine to get around. You say, I need it. But there's obviously one thing. There's certain people in life that we do not need. And you can point them out, and you may be in the majority at your time and place. You may be in excellent company who all join next to you, shoulder to shoulder, and say, here, here, yes, yes. Something should be done about those people. You do not, unless you're sitting here now and getting in the groove, ordinary intelligence does not see that is the same situation as saying, I have full faith, confidence, love, approval of the internal combustion engine, except for connecting rods. And I assume all of you know that the engine will not run without connecting rods. You will not operate without a spleen. Life would not operate without everybody. That's why we got everybody. But ordinary intelligence is made to believe that, all right, we got everybody, but we damn sure don't need everybody. In fact, well, it's not only in fact, it's not just a cynical broadside at humanity that comes out through the individual. It is not just the attack that we don't need some, that we don't need everybody. It's that some of them specifically, we would be better off signs without that group. We would improve without that group. You're just saying we would improve the internal combustion engine to finally get rid of connecting rods. But the human machine itself, if we could get rid of the spleen, then we would have something. You would have a dead body. You would have a non-functioning engine. You would have humanity ceasing to function. Local intelligence is equal to selection. Ordinary consciousness must be selective or it can't function. At least any of you that might be seeing these tapes at some other time in some other place for the first or a few times. This is not presented on the basis that it's a cure for something, because all I'm describing is not an ill. Your ordinary intelligence. You could not sit here, you could not be seeing these tapes or hearing this, and if you begin to get anything out of it, were it not for ordinary intelligence, were it not for the very things I have just been talking about for all these opening minutes, were it not for that, you couldn't even hear this enough to ever get anywhere past your ordinary state of intelligence. So it's not that that's a problem. You've got to have it to start with. But ordinary intelligence operates on the basis. The only way it functions, it must be selective. That is what I'm calling local intelligence is. It has got to be selective. It has got to focus on something and say, all right, let's talk about this. Let's talk about crime. Let's talk about crime specifically of assaults on people. Or wait a minute, let's talk about assaults, crimes against property. Let's talk about crime in this particular area. Let's talk about crime having to do with this socio-economic group. It has to be selective. That is what local intelligence is. But as long as your nervous system, I didn't stress this once or twice, I've mentioned it in the last couple of weeks, but you remember my drawing, you just think about the human spine. All right, I'll draw it again if you insist. My version of the human nervous system, the brain, base of the spine, look at as being an upright antenna. As long as the antenna, your ordinary nervous system, is as life has wired you up, then no matter which way, imagine this is actually existing in three-dimensional, it's out in the park. If you are operating on the basis, as you're wired up, of the ordinary, your nervous system operating as an ordinary antenna, then it doesn't matter which way you look, literally. It doesn't matter which way you turn, but of course most of this has to do with transliteral, or for you people from other parts of the world, metaphorically. No matter which way you look, no matter where you turn, no matter what view you try to take, it is always concentric. Your brain is at the center no matter which way you turn. You're still looking, you say, well, I'm a broad-minded person. I'll try to take somebody else's view. I try to put myself in the other guy's moccasins. I don't know why the other guy's wearing moccasins, and you can try this, but no matter what you do, you are still looking from a concentric, that is a local view, so people can try to expand their horizons. They can try to have an open mind. They can try. People do it. They say, well, one way to be more intelligent is you try to, every now and then I'll pick up the New Republic, or I'll pick up some magazine that I do not care for. I'll read the editorial page of some California fish wrapper whose the editorial writer is obviously idiots, but I'll read it and I'll try to think, well, why would somebody do that? People can try that all they want to. But as long as that is the basis, and that you turn, and no matter where you turn, you may be thinking, and this has happened throughout history, people believe, I am expanding my horizons. I am more intelligent. I have traveled. I look around. I try to listen to other people's opinion. I try to read different books. They can do that forever. Many of you have gone through, whether you thought about it on that kind of verbal basis, of trying to do that. But as long as you are operating from that ordinary position, the nervous system literally, and more so, acting as an antenna, it is always concentric, which is what I've tried to point you towards. Several times I point out that you cannot be at the center of everything, and you are. And it's got nothing to do with ego. It's not that old joke. Of course, they don't call it a joke, do they? That religion, especially, psychology, decency, is always talking about what people should not be so self-centered. People should be in favor of helping others, etc., which there's a good chemical basis for, not religious, not sociological. But what is not recognized ordinarily is that by not understanding that you are concentric, no matter where you look, no matter what you think about, no matter what kind of new view you try to take, you are staying, that is, thought-wise. Not ego-wise, not selfish-wise in some way, not greedy-wise. Here stays at the center. That no matter what you look at, no matter what you think about, what you're saying is, from this little peckerhead, no, let's be more, from this one concentric view, this is what I see. But of course it is stated like, here is the words from Mount Olympus. Well, I see what's wrong. Oh, I can tell you exactly what causes crime like that. Do any of you recall, and for those of you who don't, I will recall it for you, and those that weren't around, some earlier time this year when I was talking about the secret, the real revolutionist, you heard it pointed out that a real revolutionist needs a place from which to gather information, from which to see, observe, to reconnoiter, but a place that he can observe from and not be observed. That would be true even in the mud of external warfare. If you're going to be a spy, or if you're going to be sent out to reconnoiter, what good is it going to do if you're going to go out and try to spy on the opposing forces and energy? To go out and spy, they send you out and you walk right out through the middle of the battlefield. And you walk out and maybe try to hold up a fig leaf or maybe a sign that says, don't pay any attention to me. And you try to spy on them. If you're going to reconnoiter, if you're going to secretly try and gain some new information, then you have got to go and observe with what you have got to have to do it properly. At the very least, you've got to have a place from which you cannot be observed. There is a more enriched parallel between that and what I was just talking about, because if you can extend your own nervous system to where it is not simply a local, it is not a concentric, that you're not simply turning around as though, if we're going to use 360 degrees to cover the three-dimensional drawing, that there are little, let's say 360 little places, just to pick out a figure, that you could turn to, and you can believe, well, I'm trying to expand, I am trying to look around, I'm trying to take a different view. But all you do, at the very least, is you change from position 180 to 181. If you can expand it to where that is not the limit of your intelligence, that you could begin to be omnidirectional in this antenna, to begin to expand it, what happens then is, to ordinary intelligence, the ordinary intelligence of others, in a sense, then you do become invisible. Not physically, of course, but what becomes invisible, you cannot be seen, because your opinions, your local view, your local intelligence cannot be seen, but for a very good reason. You ain't got none. All right, you don't have any. You then have a position that you can, but this is much more complex. Some of you obviously caught a piece of it. There you stand physically, you're not going to disappear. But you can be in the midst and you can take secret views. Not that people are hiding stuff, which is another story, that everybody believes that I need secret information, or people used to, I'm sure they still do, want to find some magician somewhere that'll teach them how to do things like actually become invisible, so I could slip into people's houses, if not their minds, and learn their secrets, and I'd know their secrets and they wouldn't know that I knew them, and boy, what an advantage I'd have. They should give away prizes like that on, like Wheel of Fortune or Family Feud. Then they'd get somewhere, out of business. You could be in the midst, though, here's the reality of it, of life, and you can begin to see things that were secret. Not that people were hiding them, but they were secret from you because you had been dealing with localized views, concentric views, and you can then begin to see secrets. But nobody else can see you seeing them. It's not important to them. It's not that you're gaining some foothold into the private affairs of other people, because by then you realize that their affairs are as private and personal as yours were. which is about as personal and private as a post office box or a post office mailbox on a street corner. But you have then become a kind of living example of the revolutionary piece of information I gave out, to find a place to observe, to try and get new secret information, a place to hide and to see without being seen. There is a purpose that I brought it up then. And I was hoping some of you tonight might get a glimpse of it. For me to even have described it then, to find a place from which you can see but can't be seen. Why you don't want to be seen is, that is in your views, your local views, is you don't to be seen because you want to reach the place to where you don't have any. Then you can't be seen. You can be invisible. But the invisibility is this, that you're no longer a captive, you're no longer playing out on the airfield of local reality. You're physically there. Things shouldn't be so sticky on Friday, should they? Everybody's seen revolving doors that go round and round? Try and picture a revolving door that goes around this way, and it simultaneously goes around this way, and it coevally goes around. All right? Then consider the point that I was encouraging you, sort of, if you didn't follow it, to be invisible. Find a place to where you can look out, gain all this secret information, and not be spotted. So you don't have to be in a tree, you don't have to buy camouflage equipment and clothing, and you don't have to get you a false front, a flat of a fire hydrant or a building and try to slide around. All you got to do is have no local intelligence of your own. That is, not be broadcasting and accepting on a concentric view, and you're then invisible. Physically people see you, but you're invisible. And the reason that you want to be invisible, remember the doors that's going now in 4 different directions, the reason you want to be invisible is because to be invisible would require that you no longer be concentrically broadcasting and receiving. I'm glad I cleared that up for you. I'll try one more piece. It renders you invisible to you. It renders the dialogue, it still may be there, but it renders it by and large invisible. You can then see things that everyone else considers to be great secrets. People trying to pull out their soul, their spirit, and nowadays trying to bring their subconscious mind up to the level of consciousness. All of that is fine in the city. That's just as interesting as it's crime, cars, insurance. It's a fine hobby. But the idea, already wired into man, that there is something so complex in man, which of course at the ordinary level there is, because everyone turns around and they get one little click, and there is no answer. But from a more complex view, from a more universal view, as far as there being any complexity to man, I hate to laugh out loud and make rude noises, especially since the Dodgers left the Bronx, but no. There is none. Anybody tells you that man is complicated, I'm wasting my time saying this. But if life was so perverted in some corner of the universe that you got to the point that you knew more than your planet did, and that you still, could never happen, but listen, and you still had heroes, or a hero, which couldn't happen, but if it did on that planet, and then that hero ever was making some comment, but the comment was of a positive, laudatory nature on the complexity, God bless him, of man, the depths of man, of his spirit, the breadth of his vision and his dreams, the dark nights of his soul that produces poetry and art and blah, 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 blah. If this kind of perverted reality could ever take place and you were there, you at least should be able to slap yourself smartly to the face and realize anybody that still says, which is almost everybody in the world, just almost everybody, about the complexity, the things about man that just can never be known, not in this lifetime. Anybody that says that, I'll be frank with you, they just don't understand anything. They may be fine people, but anybody that says that, which is almost, I'll admit to you, almost everybody in the world, does not understand anything. And there's nowhere to look. It's not that they didn't go to the right school or find the secret book. It just shows that they are living in the midst of the freeway. They're living in the midst of their own running dialogue. And as far as they're concerned, they, like everyone else, are a living, almost endless pit of inexplicable behavior, random thoughts, conflicting ideas, more dots than they can ever connect. Anybody they talk to, anything they read is in direct agreement. It's good for people to have hobbies. It cuts down on crime. Think of the psychiatrists. Think of the priests and the rabbis, sociologists, psychologists. I'm not going to have to take in almost all of mankind that might be engaged in petty, if not serious crimes. Did they not have the hobbies of talking about, thinking about, writing about the complex nature of man? They could be breaking into your car right now. They could be making threatening motions toward your physical being, and if you've never been threatened by a lurking psychologist out in the alleyway, you don't know what bad news is. There has been, as all of you know, a historical attempt for men to distinguish between knowledge and then something else. And they've been writing about it as long as the Western world's been operating, trying to say that there's a difference between knowledge and wisdom, or knowledge and understanding, knowledge and something. They insist on it, and it comes out in all sorts of ways, in all sorts of human institutions, and in all sorts of people. A difference between mere, quote, knowledge and then there's something else. Let's just call it wisdom. That there is a difference, and they're just sure of it. Positive of it. Nobody can identify it. Nobody can find some distinct separation between the two. They can describe it, but they cannot find it living. They cannot find living examples of it. They can find episodic examples after the fact and say, well, the person who did this had the wisdom of Solomon. Now that I think about it, Solomon was an example. Anybody could have done what he did in that one instance of trying to divide up that child between the two mothers claiming right to it. Now that was wisdom. But you ask, all right, where is that now, right this second, contemporaneous to you? Wait a minute. Well, wait a minute. Well, what are you talking about? It can't. But there is a reality to it. There is something that life is doing. And in this attempt, in this thinking that there is a difference between mere knowledge and then something else, wisdom. What is happening is life is hinting regarding the latter, is giving a genetic hint to the possibility that man might be able to extend the boundaries of local intelligence and actually peer into a kind of boundless depths of the universe. That is what they're talking about. That is what life is talking about through man. But you see, as long as you are still limited to local intelligence, then even the dreams that local intelligence has, the theories even, the almost certainties that many people's local intelligence has, that there is a difference between knowledge, that is my ordinary what I know, and then there's something else. There's something else I can't seem to get my hands on. I know it when I hear about it. I know it when I read that other people have had it, or they had it in some episodic time frame. That was it. That wasn't ordinary knowledge. I could not have done that. Because it's always good. It's real good. If you can't be king, be the past. Because as long as you're the past, you can believe it. But the message is still coming through life genetically of the possibilities, a kind of tempting. What if you could get away from the concentric receiving and broadcasting, and you could get up and begin to peer over, and it was not your view anymore. That is what people are made to talk about, and they're trying to distinguish that understanding, wisdom, insight, to distinguish something other than ordinary knowledge. They're talking about, by life, the genetic possibility of being able to look past yourself. We got to turn the tape over. Another piece I wanted to expand from last time we taped. I point out to you, I keep trying to shave down the words, as some of you who've been around for a while notice. Such things as I point out. But here we go. I tried to point out to you verbally that those strictly human problems are always local. And by inference, if you can see it in a second, interest. Those are strictly human interest. The kinds of things that you can find no other creature on this planet, just worry about that has a similar interest. So in other words, as I've already pointed out, you've about cut it down to eating, getting laid, getting rested, getting in the shade. That's about it. After that, you have on this planet those interests and those problems that are strictly human. But those that are strictly human are based firmly on local intelligence. They are a form of local reality. But I wanted you to see something else, to consider it in another way, that there is nothing whatsoever wrong with secondary interest. And those of you that are big boys and girls, there is nothing wrong with secondary problems. It's a hobby. It's something to do. There is nothing in any way wrong, in any sense wrong, but at least any of you, which is why I bring it up, have a nervous system, have your own intelligence that have tried to short-circuit this since I started sketching it 4 or 5 or 6 nights ago. And even though I say it's artificial, arbitrary, and I made it up calling the aspects of life divided into primary, that which is just absolutely necessary to keep you alive on this planet, and then those things that are not absolutely necessary. Even though I say that it's arbitrary and that the division is artificial and that I made up this little sketch, and even though there's nothing wrong, you do need to see this. There's a way in which you need to think about this, and not the way I'm going to describe it because it doesn't cover it. But you need to think of this, that although there's nothing wrong, to say the least, with secondary activities, to say the least. So you got to follow, I keep having to break up this sentence because we're having to take a step that seems to be going somewhere, at least I'm going somewhere rhetorically with a sentence. And then I know, I'm aware of the fact I keep stopping, like how many comments can you put in one sentence? Then you kind of take a step. It's because you can't keep going this way. You want to, but I keep trying to stop you for a minute, and as it were, kind of shaking like, I know it looks like we're going this way, but don't. Try to get it kind of away from it and let yourself keep walking by and keep an eye on it. That is, get away from concentric local view. Even though there's nothing wrong, to say the least, with secondary activities, because to say the least, you would not be sitting here. None of you would have never shown up here. If it wasn't for secondary activities, we wouldn't be taping this. We wouldn't have clothes on. We'd all be doing this in the nude, and some of us, I don't think, would be all that attractive, and just things would not be going. So there's nothing wrong in some way with secondary activities, but you got to find your way to think about this, because here is the use of it, is to be aware of the fact that you could do without them. You literally could. Now, I can say about humanity in general that they literally could not. But one person, literally, you could still live for some length of time. You could abandon society. There's still enough wilderness left that you could stay out of touch. You could just leave now. Go ahead and what you got on, the clothes will finally rot off. In other words, you could be an absolute hermit. You could leave now with the intelligence you got, the vocabulary, all the information you've got. But you literally could shed yourself entirely of secondary activities. You could get out now and live. If you couldn't do it here, you could save enough money and go somewhere. There's enough room in the Amazon. There's enough room down in the very tip of South America, Australia. You could go somewhere and you could drop all secondary activities. You could do it. It is possible. This is not a sermon, and I told you it didn't really cover it, but if some of you can find a way, it is a secret weapon to be aware of the fact that I could. Not a dream that someday I'm going to save my money and I'm going to run off and I'm going to live in Romania. Well, Tahiti, they say, is very crowded. And it's not that kind of dream. It is a knowledge of the fact that physically, materially, and literally, I could shed myself of all secondary activities. It doesn't take a lot of planning. Contraire. I could go do it. I could leave tonight. And within 24 hours, I could have abandoned my car. I could be in a wilderness area, more or less. And I could walk away from it. And as long as assuming that you had some sort of free will and perseverance and determination and all that stuff they have in the city, you could go out and you could become an absolute recluse. You could cut yourself off from the secondary activities of everyone else. Simply hear that. It is a fact. It is a weapon, knowing, not theoretically, not verbally. That's why I tell you, you need to look around what I'm talking about. But to know that you could go do that. And it is not that you should go do that. But to know that you could, behind the words, is something that is not a part of ordinary people's intelligence. But it's not strange enough, if I got to go through this again, which I'm about to, I could take some ordinary person and say, and I could give them this whole little scheme of mine about life, the activities everybody is engaged in. All alternatives and possibilities in life, I can divide up into primary activities and secondary activities. And I can talk to them a few minutes and go, all right, I'll see what you mean. And then I could say, all right, now, also all problems are secondary. They might say, you mean that pursuing secondary activities is the only thing that produces secondary problems. And I could say, I didn't say that, you said that. And then they could say, all right, now you're saying that you could abandon civilization and get to a position that all you were dealing with would be primary interest. And I could say, yeah, that's sort of what I was saying. And they'd say, and then you're inferring at least that then all problems, which you said were secondary in nature anyway, would cease to be. And then I could say, well, you said that. Of course, by then, ordinary intelligence, if not before then, be sick of talking to me anyway. Do I have to say all that? So I just made that up, that scene. So do I have to go back and replay it and to tell you that? It's not that you should go do it. But ordinary people could hear this, if they wanted to, and say, all right, yeah, you're right. All right, theoretically, I could just give up everything, go live in a tree. Go out and get in some wilderness area, and I could just stay there. And you're right, I wouldn't have to pay taxes. I wouldn't worry about what the fall schedule is going to be on television. I wouldn't be concerned over the fact that Coppola can't seem to ever make another decent movie, or that Brando is so overweight now that he can't even make facial expressions. Or that all art has gone downhill since Pollock is dead. I think he's dead. I don't hope he is. It was a little joke, see. Or that there is no good music now that Handel is dead and JB is put away. Somebody could say all that. They could say, yeah, theoretically I could, But you understand it's a local view that they're hearing it, because they're also saying, well, I'm not going to. I'm not going to. No civilized person, no intelligent person is going to. And I just told you, I'm not even telling you that you should. This is what I like about living here on this planet. Is to get to some of it, and I can see some of you, and on tape, I can see some of your faces out there. You get there, and verbally, you say, yeah, I know what you're saying, but you should feel there's something lacking. It's to be able to use the fact that there you stand in the midst of the ordinary dialogue and the free way of life, and you are in the grips. You are the grips, according to which way you're looking at, of a problem. Somebody has broken into your car. Somebody has lied to you. Somebody that owed you money said, I'm not going to pay you. The business you worked so hard for, you went to open this morning and 4 of your employees didn't show up. And you could go, all of that. You could say, well, all right, you're saying, try and listen to it. Not just my words, but for you to know yourself. Not because I told you, not because I stand here for another 10 or 15 minutes, and at least metaphorically go boom, boom, boom. But for you to realize, not theoretically, chemically, that every problem you've got other than death, if you still want to call it, every other problem you've got, not only is secondary, but you could cure it pretty quickly by abandoning all secondary activity, and you would not have to stay here and do it piece by piece, like trying to take apart the puzzle that you've connected the dots thus far. You don't have to go back and try to unconnect them or erase it. All you'd have to do is physically, a simple act, within a few hours remove yourself. Get in a rowboat, damn it. Start sailing out. Most everybody's sing this. You live within 3 or 4 hours of the ocean at least. Get in a little boat and sail away. Start rowing. In a few hours, you will have no secondary problem. You will not. It's not that you should, and it's not funny, it is not cynical, and it is not as obvious as it is when you go, oh yeah, yeah. Not to use it. To use it takes a universal, a more universal intelligence to have that kind of continuing awareness, which local intelligence has no continuing awareness of anything. That's why it's local. But for you to have a continuing awareness, as I started to say, in case you think I lost my place, ha ha ha. Where's my... But there you stand having a problem, and if you can remember, and the problem, that is the stimuli that made your brain chemistry be upset, and to label it properly a problem, to realize this problem, as heartbreaking as it is, as gut-wrenching as this kind of shit is to me that happens in life, and as much as I seem helpless to deal with what seems to be the stimuli of the problem, in this case, let's say some particular kinds of people, I can't deal with those kind of people. They continue to take advantage of me. I'm afraid of them or whatever. There is a solution at that level. Not to them, to the whole smear of secondary problems. You can simply abandon them. And you cannot do that to primary problems. The point is of having some of your own understanding of that is an absolute chemical weapon. Put more specifically, it is a new chemical transmitter in your brain. Because it's not that. I've been through enough here for the last few minutes. You hear exactly what I'm describing. You simply go off and become a hermit. You've abandoned all civilization, all people. All right? You're not supposed to. You shouldn't. But you could. You literally could. That brain, and anybody else can hear me say that and go, yeah, yeah, yeah. Their brain chemistry is not altered by that. And just me saying it to you is not going to alter your brain chemistry. What I'm telling you, if you can begin to expand your own brain chemistry, which is what I'm saying in reality about expanding a localized concentric view, to where no matter what happens, even if you've got a more universal view, as long as you're on this planet, when the river rises, mud gets in your boots too. So, you got that. You're not going to get away from that. Plus, you're going to die like everybody else on this planet. But to have a continuing awareness of the fact that other than that, these other problems that seem to knock me down, steal my mind, the same as everybody else, they're not secondary in theory. You don't have to call me anything anymore once you see it. You understand what I mean by then, that all of that is a part of being alive at the local level. It's the same as you cannot condemn, unless you're just ordinary, you cannot go around worrying about crime, and especially that somebody stole your new car. Because what you call crime were not the conditions there that produce what you call crime. The conditions would not have produced what you call my car, my stolen car. You can't separate them. Don't even talk about connection. Don't even talk about they're linked together. There is no word for it. Oh, I can say a word. They are together. You cannot have the internal combustion engine by taking out the connecting rods. I don't care how much you dislike them. I don't care how much life has made you dislike them. I don't care what kind of subconscious hatred you have of those damn rods. If you do succeed, you've ruined the engine. If you did do away with crime, what you call the crime, you would do away with what you call my car. You wouldn't have a car. Were it not for secondary problems. See, this is not a cure for those, because they're not a problem. It's not a nil that this is here to cure. But what you call, what ordinary people call secondary problems, were it not for that, there would be no secondary life. Were it not for that, there'd be no secondary intelligence. Were it not for there being problems in your life, you would have no life. You might be alive at the primary level. You might be hooked up to machines, or you might be laying in a ditch, but you would not be a human. It's so simple. What you call at the ordinary level, from a local view, what people call the problems of life, the stresses of life, I don't care how subtle they seem or how egregious and crude they may appear, were it not what you call the problems, the stresses, the unfortunate occurrences in life, were it not for those, there would be no life. How much more simple can it be? And to know that is to know that whatever is going on now, there is a chemical reality behind all these old sayings and all the things that life has made religions put out. But things like, this too shall pass. It's not only this too shall pass, this too has passed. But see, at local level intelligence, it always has to be within a time frame, that like this too shall pass. And it sounds like, well, stiff upper lip, old chap, hold on, and where it is shall pass. And in the 3D world, yes, it does. Because the merry-go-round comes around, and you're sick for a while, and then you're well. At the secondary level, that you're stressed out. You had a heartbreaking love affair, and you hear these great words of wisdom, this too shall pass. And sure enough, it does. It passed, and then it comes back around, your little heart gets broken again. But see, the real universal reality behind that is not that this too shall pass. It's coevally going on that what you think of is the problem now, or this thing that's not passed that will pass, it has already passed. It is passing. But see, if you're seeing it locally, it's always it's either here, or it's gone, or it's coming up. That things aren't right now, but I know this. Coming up, I'm fixing to have my heart broken again. I'm fixing to be lied to again. But a universal view then would be that whatever you think either has happened, is happening, or is going to happen, it's all the same. Not science fiction. It is all there. And therefore, that's the reality behind all the religious ideas of, well, things will get better. And they'll get better after you die, which is another story. Or another version is they were better before you were born. But see, the more universal view would be, yeah. Well, a man would be better off not born. Yeah. Right now is the prime of our life. Right? Yeah. Things will be a lot better when we die. Yeah. There's a kind of limit. If you want to take a real quick sidestep, this almost sounds. This is a good litmus test to see if you're listening with local intelligence. I'm going to give an example, and I'm going to try to. I'll do my best to do it real fast and just do it and leave it, because it can sound as though it is an absolute naysay and a denial of what I was just talking about. Okay? But I wouldn't do that to you. It must have some other purpose. Either that, or you have finally lost your minds because all of you think that I'm saying what you hear me saying now, and I'm not. Well, the only alternative to that is, see, we don't go into it. Listen, what if the limits of local intelligence, what if you could you took half of humanity right now and you could suddenly convince them, just nice and simple the way I'm saying, that you just simply convinced them that life is indeed a burden and better shed of by dying, that life is just like a trial, some kind of tribulation, a curse, and we'd be better off, don't fear death, you'll be better off to be done with it. So you do that and 50% of humanity, got it. You tell the other 50%, hey, life itself is like, God, it's the Elysian fields on which to frolic, on which to reach fulfillment in this lifetime. And the 50% say, got it. If you did that, the difference it would make in the way in which they lived and their behavior would be, if I may be bombastic, would be nil. I don't even have to prove that. I don't even have to say any more, except the little hint I gave you before I used the example. In other words, if you think that proves something, you're listening with local intelligence. A little piece we're about to run out, but to tag on to what I was talking about, that you should not go out and cut yourself off from civilization. I don't care if you do. Of course, if you're going to, you shouldn't care whether I care or not. Because if you care if anybody cares, you can't do it anyway. You're going off and worry about it, because you're going to worry about whether we're worried where you are and whether you're doing all right, so you hadn't done it. But I just wanted to simply point out for anybody, especially maybe some of the newer people, none of what I said is in some way to infer that there is some superiority in living a dull, bland life. But notice it is a small step from the kinds of things I'm talking about, albeit I'm using my own descriptions of religions, of the more mystical aspects of many religions, and all kinds of self-help weird groups, or things that, I don't mean weird in a pejorative term, but out of the ordinary, and things that you've thought about. And they consistently, throughout the history of man, you've known that people that believe they're on some quest that without the ordinary, is they will. One of the first things that they like to do is to cut themselves off, although they don't use my term, but from secondary, they would call them carnal, dull manifestations, participations in life. Is they'll give up good food, they'll just go back to eating instead of dining. They'll go back to just wearing clothes rather than being concerned about fashion. They'll perhaps, since sex gets so sticky, the easy way is normally, well, I'll just give it up as long as I can. I don't know how to cut down on it. I'll stop my subscription to Playboy, and that'll really, I guess a lot of guys, be their attitude to really roughing it. But what I'm talking about, even though it's not a cure for any sort of ill, it is not even to infer in some way that there would be some boon to you to try and live a dull, bland life in some way devoid of secondary activities. Contraire. You'd be a fool to do it. Unless, like everything else, I got to tell you, unless you knew how. And if you wanted to, it's nobody's business, because you wouldn't care anyway, and you wouldn't be here, and you wouldn't be hearing me say this, and so I'm wasting my time. But there is an unrecognized excitement. There is a kind of power and a real kind of brain smile, which is a private affair, in realizing that there is a continuing possibility right at hand of being able, physically, literally, and you understanding it, of being able to forsake all secondary interest, which would in turn stop all secondary problems. Whether you do it or not. And this doesn't make sense. I know the sentence makes sense. It just sounds silly or ridiculous. It doesn't matter whether you do it or not if you've got a universal understanding of it. Because if you've got a universal understanding of it, then you understand that to do it or not do it would put me back in a fragmented position anyway. So once you understand it, it doesn't matter. Are you dull or not dull? Yeah. I mean, if you had the answer, either yeah, and if anybody said, what? Go, oh, no. Are you happy or unhappy? 7. All right. Do you agree with us or not? In 5. No, that's just, I'm just being ridiculous. But the point is, if you had a more universal view of it, a more universal understanding of what life was, then you've got the secret use of understanding that what passes as problems that are real enough can be literally avoided with no great spiritual effort, no great intellectual effort, that you could actually walk out of the city and go into the woods. Your cholesterol would go down, if there is such a thing. Your blood pressure would go down, assuming you've got any. Your ulcers would clear up. You'd stop all kinds of habits that has the potential to hurt you. You would stop smoking, unless you started smoking tree bark, I guess. You'd stop drinking. You'd stop taking drugs. You'd stop doing all the things that in the city a local intelligence would tell somebody, you shouldn't do this, you should change, and I'll tell you why. All those whys, all those secondary problems, you wouldn't even have to exert any sort of willpower. Just go get in a rowboat and go out and live in the middle of the Atlantic from now on until further notice. You don't have to pay somebody to teach you to stop smoking, or you don't have to pay somebody to teach you to quit overeating. All secondary problems just miraculously will go away. Beyond the limits of those words, there is a power. And knowing that, and understanding that, but not just the words. If you just go, yeah, and you just write it down like, I'll remember that, it's just local. Because if you understand it, you don't even have to write it down, you don't even have to think about it. And you don't have to tell yourself, this too shall pass. You know it already has. You know it hadn't, you know it did, it will. Well, I've got to go. I got a date with this mailbox on the corner. All right. I got an excursion. I want to tell you about it right quick. And that is that everybody needs a secret. I'm talking about you people. And not a secret, not something that you're ashamed of, not something that's already mechanically going on, that you're ashamed of the world-shaking collection of pornography you have under your bed. And you women, you got your own, I don't even think about it. Not a secret that's in some way shameful to you. Just forget it. I don't care what it is. Not that. You need a secret that you have willfully picked out. And I'm saying that this is useful. And we don't have time, which I'm glad, because I didn't want to try to tell you. I'm just going to tell you, and those that you can hear it by now, we'll try to do something with it. You need to pick out a secret that only you know. And I'll give you 2 or 3 real quick examples, and then you can find your own. You shouldn't let anybody in the world know what time you get up in the morning. One, for instance, if you're living with somebody, of course that gets sticky. You shouldn't let anybody know exactly what, I don't mean all these, I'm just hitting around just whatever I can think of. You shouldn't let anybody know exactly what exercises you do, assuming you do some. Or maybe people know you run. Don't let anybody know exactly how far you run. And I mean willfully do it. Don't do it. And if it takes this, I'm going to say this verbally, if it takes this, not to do it, but for you to hear me, that if somebody says, how far are you running now, is even let them know that you're not going to tell them. Or else tell them, and if they're sharp enough, if they're wired up in a certain way you can do it, is tell them, but make sure they get the message that they're not to believe that. Don't let anybody know what you actually eat, other than when you got to eat around people. Just take up something if you know how to do it. Don't do this literally, but just start living off of kumquats for a while. If that's all you eat is canned kumquats, but don't let anybody know it. Hide the cans, don't let everybody see your garbage. Don't let anybody know what you read. Find something. Everybody can do this if you hear the validity, or if you even suspect it. You need to have at least a secret that nobody, your wife, your best friend, that nobody knows exactly. Nobody. And it can be just absolutely useless, which of course all secondary, well, let's don't go into that again. Don't let anybody know really what you enjoy. Don't let anybody know actually what you ever think. Or those of you that can really get in the big leagues, don't let anybody know really what you are. That is the big secret. And you can do it, well, not hiding. You can do it right in front of people's faces. And those that are good always suspect that, I'm not receiving all this right from that person. They don't make anything out of it. And that's not the point. It's to spook or to make anybody curious. It's for your benefit. And if it sounds too weird, you may ignore it. That's why it's at the tail end of the tape, so it won't frighten the public. But those of you who can hear it, everybody needs a secret. A secret, and don't let anybody know, even if it is just what time you get up. If you can pull that one off, that's a fine one. I just tried to pick out something that's simple, that when your brain first heard it, you might have gone, what? Or don't let anybody know exactly. If somebody says, you still get up early and do exercises, and if you've slipped up and say, well, yeah, or they know you do, maybe. And they say, well, what do you do now? Which ones? Are you still doing so-and-so, or do you have any weights at home, or do you buy a Nautilus machine, or do you just do calisthenics? Is keep some part of it secret. You just don't let anybody know. And if they think they already know, you got to pick out something. Start doing sit-ups backwards. Whatever that would be. But don't let anybody in the world ever know it. And you may have to keep changing it. But you should have a willfully selected, and of course useless, secret. Everybody should have a secret. Bye.